Hello. Wow. I don't know if I can compete with the ceiling. It's beautiful, but it's great to be here in Antwerp. Thank you for having me. I've come from Sydney, Australia, via London. Looks a little bit like this. And I'm obsessed with letterforms, painting, typography, illustration. And you can find my work on everything from posters to packaging and Porsches. We've got a woo for the Porsche. So here we are in Antwerp. I arrived, it was beautiful, it was sunny. This morning, shout out to the less sunny running group. Who's coming tomorrow? These are the people to compete with. These are the people to beat. So I arrived in Antwerp. It's the second time here. It's a beautiful city. There's so much history, so much culture. And I thought on the first day I'm going to explore. And this was a good sign that exploring was going to happen. The internet was down, so I had the whole city to discover. It began, like every good day, with coffee and a persimmon, or a kaki fruit, my favorite. And I started to notice that in Antwerp, even the graffiti was Rubenesque, with the beautiful spirals. And my eyes are tuned to looking for words and flowers. Words, typography, and beautiful blooms. And almost every store in Antwerp has a beautiful bunch of flowers, so it was the perfect city for me. Of course, I also love machines. This was a very cute cherry picker, I think, which looked like it was hiding behind a wall. And then it was back to words, beautiful typography, signage, lettering. And on my little stroll, I landed in the Planter Museum, a beautiful history of books and culture and publishing. And as I looked through all of the amazing specimens and typography, I discovered this wonderful map. And I immediately, just automatically, you try and see yourself in the world, started looking for Australia. And then I remembered, at this point, Australia was in the great mystery. It was there, but it had not yet been discovered. But that's okay, because there was not one, but two Australian waffle places in Belgium. I don't think either of these are actually Australian companies, but it made me feel right at home. So today my talk is called Words That Bloom. And as you may suspect, it's this amalgamation of my two favorite things, which in many ways I think are quite similar. We have technology and language, something that's very human, it's our way to communicate, and then nature's way to communicate. So I grew up in Mount Glorious. I started painting, was very creative from a young age, and my first creation was something I loved, my pet chicken Rosie. From there I advanced to books. There was Violet's Party. The computer came along, started to have a bit of technology shaping my creations in 1999, and I began making portraits of my Uncle Justin, using Wingdings and Webdings as my first fonts in an artwork. But despite being a creative kid, I ended up going to law school. And after about a year and a half, I realized that my heart wasn't in it, and I switched over to art school. And this is where I truly discovered and fell in love with typography for the first time. And I think the reason I loved it was because I was a letterpress printer, a student learning, and suddenly there were these physical letter forms. Now, remember, Australia wasn't on the map, so think about the culture that I was exposed to at the time. There wasn't this rich printing history. There weren't these amazing museums with Rubens paintings for me to be inspired by. So the chance to be able to learn something that had a bit of history was an mind-opening moment for me. And my task that I was set by my letterpress printing teacher was to mind my P's and Q's, which was at the time called the 4 demons when you were setting type. So I was an apprentice printer. I took on the persona of Mrs. Eves, which you may know the font Baskerville. Mrs. Eves is this more feminine, beautiful version designed by Zuzanna Licco in honor of one of the first women involved in the typography world. And I began a blog for the love of type. And this was where I collected all my growing inspiration, my experiments in the letterpress studio. That was 2009, so it was pre-Instagram. This was the place that I started to combine my love of drawing, illustration, and lettering as one. So these are some of the very early sketchbooks that I started to make as a student in university. And then after a short stint of exploration, speaking at my first conference in Germany, I got a real job at Animal Logic. And suddenly I was thrown into a very non-analog world. At Animal Logic, we created, digital mock-ups, Photoshop setups for insurance commercials or films like Happy Feet, Lego Movie. So I was in a whole new world. And although I learnt many skills, my heart was still very much in the analog world. So when a project came along where I was able to actually work by hand, create illustrations in watercolor, I was very excited. So that was the moment where I realized I didn't really fit in a big full-time company and began my career as a freelance artist. So I was living in an attic in a studio with housemates in Sydney in my early 20s, and this became the place where I could find my own voice in the lettering and typography world. Now, if you can cast your mind back to 2012, it was really this moment when pre-AI, everyone was embracing a very handmade aesthetic. So chalk lettering was huge everywhere. There was a lot of calligraphy, and there was almost this fetishizing of the handmade. And this was perfect for me, and it led to a huge amount of commissions, a chance for me to explore and to bring my love of drawing into the way that I worked with type. So I was really interested in finding ways to break typography out of the constraints of what I'd learned in terms of Bauhaus printing, things that felt a little bit boring to me. I wanted to add intricacies like galaxies and dots and details, and I wanted to make the text seem it was completely integrated with elements from nature. So what I started to do was every time I would travel or I would go on a hike, I would collect elements from nature and draw them and make almost like my own stock library. So these were all drawn by hand and then scanned in, and every time a project would come along, I would kind of choose from this library to integrate. And often they coincided with, specific, meaningful things in my life, whether it was a garden or a place where I'd grown up, and it was my own kind of personal set of assets to use. So I created things like these organic letterforms for Pure, and started to find ways to combine charcoal, ink, and despite being very analog at heart, I started to integrate some technology into the ways that I would translate this into projects as well. But drawing felt very slow, and I have a lot of energy, and so I wanted to find a way that within the world of typography, there could be some more physical movement. And calligraphy was almost, I guess it was something where you could iterate, rather than just doing one version and finessing it over time, like lettering. Calligraphy, you were able to do multiple versions, and with each version, have something slightly different. So I tried steel pens, balsa wood. I didn't have any formal calligraphy training, so it was very experimental. And this was very appropriate for surf brands, skate brands, music, any world within advertising or marketing that wanted to have this kind of fluid, free motion within the style of the words. The third kind of trifecta within my practice was painting. So I felt like I could explore with drawing, I could let loose with calligraphy, and then I was interested in scale. Everything I liked to do involved parts of the body, and you've probably seen that video of that man drawing that really quick circle. And there was something about scaling things up that started to make it a full body experience. So this began with one commission where I was asked to hand paint 47 billboards. And I'd never done anything this scale before, but I just said yes. We worked with Serifscript as the existing font. I did chalk outlines, and then over 4 days, found a brush that exactly fit the width of the letterforms and painted them all in one go. But they said, we've got one that we want you to paint in situ on the streets of Sydney. The only problem is you're going to have to go up in the scissor lift, paint it live, and we'll capture a photograph at the very end. At the time, I didn't have my scissor lift license, so they said, there's going to be a man with you, and he will operate the scissor lift. You say when you want to go up and down, and so on. And so I completed the artwork, and then at the very end, they said, we just need one picture of you with the billboard, but the man can't be in it. And so he was like, well, that's okay, I'll just lie down. And so you can see him immortalized. So from this point forward, I had this painting practice, but it was born out of this world of advertising. And my heart was still very much interested in being an artist. Even though I'd studied design, that was just the only way that I could see a leap from law to something more creative. But deep down, my heart was being an artist. And so I wanted to find words that I could incorporate into the pieces I was creating that were born of my experience in the world. You know, some things that were just silly throwaway phrases, things that were more poetic. And I started to incorporate these into some larger installations and working with galleries. And so this was in 2017 in LA. And with these exhibitions, the idea was that it would be transient. So it would exist only in memory. I would come in with a team of painters, paint it over a course of a week or two. It would be open to the public, and then it would be gone forever. So the processes I utilized were experimental. I'd never been shown how to work large scale. I worked with a combination of measuring and grids, projectors, any technology I could find to help. Later on, I started to learn a more traditional sign painter's method of using pounce patterns. That tool that I'm using there is called an electro-pounce. And basically, the way that it works is I print the artworks at 100% and then outline just the key lines with this tool that makes tiny perforated holes, like zzz, all the way through. Move into the space with the holes on the paper, then use charcoal pads to kind of leave a little mark that you can see me doing there on the side. And that is how I would then have some pencil marks to work up the final design. So these were really where my heart was, to have these, monumental-sized letter forms inspired by things like illuminated manuscripts and this big-scale text was something that really took my practice from not only advertising world, but into this more art space as well. And a lot of this was a chance for me to experiment. I'm like, what would that look like large scale? Could I achieve this in the time? And I'd noticed that about 2 years later, anything that I experimented with in an art gallery was what clients would start to commission. There was another place I drew. Outside of the attic and the studio and galleries, I started traveling on aeroplanes. And here I kind of let loose. Sometimes I found art was a bit too serious, and I wanted to find other ways to play with words. So every time I flew, I would think of a puke pun, I would draw it on the air sickness bag, and then leave it in the seat for the next customer. So I switched my pseudonym from Mrs. Eves to Mrs. Heaves, and over the course of 2 years, did about 30 of these air sicknesses bags. All right, everyone's favorite topic, technology. The tools that have shaped my practice have started to shift with time. And although I identify as being very analog, the reality is, the pencil is a tool. The pencil was a piece of technology. And that seamlessly different elements would introduce themselves into my practice. And I started to see that this changed what I created. At first, I was very resistant to working on the iPad. And Apple and Adobe, kind of would send these tools to artists to just see what they would create. And one thing that you may have noticed about all the work that I've shown you to this point is that it was all black and white. And part of the reason was because I was scared of working with color. It was slower, working by hand to integrate color felt like this very daunting task. But the iPad changed that. It was this fast-paced tool that you could experiment with, and suddenly color exploded into my work. And it was hyper. It was driven by this moment where suddenly everything was backlit on a screen, and that started to be reflected in the work I was creating. And a lot of commercial clients also really loved the idea of color being incorporated into campaigns. I did stick to the original pencil method for at least the first sketches. So I would draw in pencil, digitally color it on the iPad, and this was a way to then, start to incorporate vectorizing, and it just led to a whole broad range of packaging and other projects that I don't think I ever would have done had I stuck to just working in pen and ink. it started to become a lot more crisp. The murals that I started to do also started to incorporate these bright colors. And I was kind of on the hunt for something that could match this saturation in the digital world in real spaces as well. All right, how's everybody feeling? You feel it? Whoa, yes! Does this say the internet is broken? Is this similar to the first slide I showed? Technical problems. I think it's time for a book break. What do you think? Let's do it. Okay, let's go analog. All right, so every time I travel now, I don't take the air sickness bags to draw on, but I do have an entire small suitcase filled with my sketchbooks. So I brought these along to show you some of the pre-iPad work that I started to create. So in 2018, I started to collate a lot of the hand-drawn pieces that I made. So some of these were client pieces. These were often created in small fine point markers and pens. You can start to see here, as I was talking about before, the elements that kind of go behind building up these layered pieces. So I would often even draw things like the dots and the patterns. These are some of the elements from nature that I would start to collect. And this, you can't really see it there with the light, but this is kind of collecting the words. And when I think of words that bloom, it's almost like the words that would just appear in my mind to incorporate into artwork. So I'd collate these into my sketchbook. And you can start to see, this is the final result, but these were some of the earlier, the mock-ups that I would do. This is pencil. This is the process that I would build on from using perhaps an existing font like Futura that I would manually adjust in Illustrator, print it out, often draw grid lines to help have the flow of the energy that would be the shape of the final design. And then I would take this to a paint shop and manually color match the pieces that would come together. Another thing that I started to do when I felt a little bit of digital exhaustion was that I decided that I was going to print out every saved image that was my inspiration folder and see what my patterns were. This was about 2 years before ChatGPT and the AI explosion. But what I realized recently is what I was doing was essentially, looking for patterns, collecting data on myself and seeing what I was into. And I was into, color and repetition. This was the most interesting thing to me. I was like, oh, I collect lots of things with eyes. So that's how I'd be getting targeted advertising for eyes. Fine line dots, anything with circles. And this became this new way to feel like a sense of agency over my practice, because as Instagram became more and more prevalent, I realized that the way that I was creating work was being driven by the external response. So I just wanted to kind of become a recluse and discover what is my practice without that instant feedback. So these pieces, again, were a combination of including, hand-drawn elements, individual dots from Illustrator patterns. And you can see here, this might have been the original kind of developed pencil sketch I'd share with the client. Then I would sometimes print at large scale, draw the individual letters again, move these things around, and that's how you'd land at the final piece. So I had these kind of swatch books of my inspiration, the process behind murals. Some of these I wouldn't even finish the initial sketch. It would just be, this is the colors I'm going to work with and leave it there. And then I started to use it as a way to make color studies as well. So this was the initial collection of inspiration that I would find. And then a couple of years later, I made this for an exhibition, which was screen printed. This is one of the transparencies. And looking back, I'm like, oh, well, that's where the colors came from. It wasn't a kind of pre-planned process, but it was basically consciousness made visible in many ways. So this I then translated to my client work. So I would take photos of these, and there was something about the physicality of also being in a book that just limited my options, because sometimes working digitally, it feels like you can just endlessly iterate. So this was a way to make it simpler. So you can start to see this was a magnolia that was included in this one here, another screen print, swirls and patterns. And there is the beginnings of the hyperphase that started to come through in about 2020. And sometimes I think that there's messages being sent when I'm, from within, of what is it that is, connecting with me, but also of that particular moment. So from really saturated colors, I then wanted to loosen things up and return to, more pencil, watercolor, oil pastels. This was a digital mock-up for one of the paintings. And has anyone here draw from life? Who's an artist? Yes, okay. I think observational life drawing was one of the things that really reset my attention after being caught in this digital space. It was a way to kind of see more clearly. So if you don't do it, I would highly recommend. Okay, have you had enough of the book break? Not yet? Would you like a calligraphy 101? Okay. Now, somebody give me a word. Something delicious. Something round? Pizza. Let's begin with pizza. Okay. Now, I would like the frame to look nice, but I would also like you to be able to see what I'm doing. I think this is good. Pizza? Pizza. Okay. Let's begin. I would like you to tell me what I'm doing. Observe any patterns. That's okay, but I think I can do better. So I like to think of calligraphy as almost like choreographed writing. So often, say we're working with the P, it's made up of small parts, individual strokes, pressure, angle, direction, and it's shaped by the tool that you're using as well. So often this can be broken down into downstrokes, where it's thick, consistent, upstrokes, where you're just using the tip of the pen, and then you join those two together, and you've got an M, just like that. For curved letter forms like an A or a G, it's essentially the same. So if you imagine that this individual, it's almost like a tram track. And on a curved shape, you're still using this downward stroke, but if it's traveling like on a path like this, and you're holding the pen correctly, you'll naturally get the thicks and thins in the areas that you want, which adds to the overall rhythm and consistency of the word. Okay, so we've got pizza. Have we got another round, delicious word that we can draw? Donut. We'll do donut, and then I want someone to think of a word with the letter K in it separately. Donut. Okay, this is a good little demo. We've got 10 minutes, so another little tip, should you decide after this lesson to begin your calligraphy career, which I would highly recommend, is with an N and a U, essentially, as I was telling you before, about these downstrokes and these upstrokes. It would be very easy to confuse an N and a U. So what you want to do is, sorry everybody. That's better. You're essentially doing the same thing, so you're using the same angle, but on the N, it's going to be kind of shooting over this way on the upstroke. So you've got down, down, up, down. Whereas on the U, it's almost like it's inverted. So you're going to come down and then lift up on that stroke. So then that subtle difference will give you a little bit extra legibility. All right. Now I want to show you one deviation from the rule. So most of the letter forms in this particular style of brush script are based on the same angle again and again, repeating like this, until you reach the lowercase k or an uppercase R. So what's a word? Let's do kick. So tell me what happens on, what am I doing? What's a difference? What's a deviation in the pattern? Can anyone tell me on which part of the stroke something changes? This bit? Yes? So what's happening here is you're essentially breaking the rules. You've got the downstroke, the upstroke, a little mini downstroke, and then you're flipping your hand completely around to kick out like that. And the only other letter form that happens on is in an uppercase R, like that. All right. We'll do one last Antwerp. You're a very polite and warm audience. Very well behaved. Okay. So the other great thing is that once you have that original structure and the rhythm, then you can be flamboyant and break out of the rules. So say we were going to write Antwerp. You've got this beautiful big entry stroke. I'm going to come back and get that T, don't worry. Antwerp. That's quite good. Let's do another one. Any feedback? Yes, sir.
Can you do capital
Capital
L?
N? L. Absolutely. Let's write the word love. That's one. I think you could do it like this, or you could do it more. That's a bit wild, sorry. You can also come up here and do something like this, and you could come back around and add all sorts of flourishes. A lowercase l is also something like this. That's quite nice. All right, any other questions about calligraphy before we go back to the boring world of technology and slides? No final requests? Waffles. Australian waffles? Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, W. Okay, let me think about this for a minute. Yes. Okay, this is good because we've got a double F. Okay, so I don't want to do the same F, so I'm just going to come, okay, maybe a little thing like that. It's okay. One more. My pen's actually going to run out. See, would a robot do that? No. Oh my God, I forgot the S. Wait. Yeah, I promise this is the last one. Waffles. Okay. Yes. Wait. Yes. All right. 5 minutes left. I got a bit carried away there. Thank you, everybody. If you would like to practice at home, the brush pens that you can find in Europe are called, this is not sponsored, by the way, Koi coloring brush pen or Tombow brush pens are my favorites. All right. So after the world of drawing, writing, calligraphy, painting, commercial work, reconnecting with my practice. I reached this point in my career right before the pandemic where all my dreams came true. I had this amazing studio space in Sydney. I started to use it to paint, so I was incorporating these analog processes back into my artwork. I was working on big canvases that were playing around with words, inspired by people like Jenny Holzer, Ed Ruscha, making type-based art, and working with my hands. And it started to lead to this moment where all my dreams came true. I had an Apple billboard around the corner from my studio. I started to work on really high-stakes commissions for clients like Tiffany & Co., and I had my own billboard in Times Square during the pandemic. Woo! I even had my very own scissor lift. But what started to happen, and I believe in one of the earlier talks we talked about identity crises, but when you're an artist, it's called the blues, and I never thought that creative block would happen to me, but in this space where it was almost like I could do anything, my dream studio, my very own scissor lift, I wanted to paint the walls, instead of running towards my creative practice, I ran away in the face of fear and became obsessed with running. And I'd always ran throughout my life, but suddenly it was going from a 5K to a 10K to a half marathon to a marathon, and then finally to an ultra marathon. So I started training, and we got up to about week 6 of the training, 35 kilometers the trail race, and suddenly the race got cancelled because there was crazy weather in Australia, landslides, the course was unsafe, and I had this kind of light bulb moment where I realized deep down that I was running away from what I really wanted to be doing, and wasn't to be an ultra runner, I wanted to be an ultra artist. So I thought, is there a way that I can take all these tools from the mental approach to ultra running, this idea of endurance, this idea of doing things when they're boring, when they're hard, this idea that, I'm an artist, it's a luxury, it's an amazing job to be creative, and that sometimes you just need to be your own coach. So I kind of took these skills, decided that I was going to do an art residency in my own studio, and I was going to get art fit. So for me, that was about learning to draw from life. I think it's very easy to take shortcuts when you have technology, but the thing that you miss out on is the experience and the effort and the reward and the ability to do something with confidence. And I think that gives you a sense of pride in your practice that can combat anything. And people often talk about imposter syndrome, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe sometimes it's true, but maybe imposter syndrome is sometimes a sign that you want to grow. And for me, that was going back and learning traditional drawing. I converted all my runs to the art gallery only. I did one to the Rubens Museum yesterday, and it was a way just to keep this same practice of an obsessive behavior, but shift it towards the thing that felt more true to my deepest dreams. I needed some new time management methods, so I overtook what's the tomato one? The Pomodoro method, but I needed to make it my own, and I love fruit, so mine was the pomelo method. And every time I would, color in these little blocks of work and move on. So I began painting. And the funny thing was that when I did actually get back into this rhythm of creating again, my mind started to wander. It was almost as though my body was relaxed, I knew what I was doing, and something very interesting happened. I wasn't thinking about art anymore. I started thinking about brains and what was happening when you do life drawing. What's happening with your perception? Is this a tool that you could actually use to retrain your attention? All of these new ideas from neuroscience started to be happening while I was painting. And so I collected these ideas in my studio, and over the last 3 months of doing this self-imposed artist residency, started to imagine perhaps a different future for myself. So I completed my final mural in my space, and as I thought about this, my original dreams had always been this: I was going to be this lady. And I would like to still be this lady, but with better posture. But I needed to grow my brain. I felt as though after 10 years of working so visually and in this digital space and working with my hands, that I had been ignoring the big fluffy thing in here. And so now, for the next year, I'm doing a master's in neuroaesthetics in London. I'm going to keep up the drawing and the painting and my normal art practice, but I want to see if there's something else beyond. And so this is an experiment. I'll report back if I get invited back in another year or two. Perhaps I'll have some new insights. But those were the words that bloomed when I was painting, something completely unexpected. So I'm going with it, and I want to see what happens at this intersection of text, understanding, meaning, working with other humans, and potentially what these insights could bring to things like well-being, or things that happen in the world that could be a continuation of this interest in working by hand with humans and nature. So, thank you very much for having me, Antwerp. I hope you all run tomorrow.
Oh, thank you so much, Gemma. Would you join me for a quick conversation?
Yes.
And it's so incredible to see you bring your books every time. It's just so beautiful to just look at that. And amazing, amazing. We have a lot of questions that came up very quickly. One of them came almost immediately. First of all, I have to say that one person wrote, "I felt very sad when you just did swoosh." Right, so that was that.
I'm sorry.
But I guess also the common sentiment is it's very difficult to get to a point where you feel like, I'm getting there, I'm pretty good. So we also have a question here of what would you suggest to people who maybe don't have a lot of experience in calligraphy or feel like maybe they don't even have a talent, although that's, I would say, is questionable, but really want to become an artist. It also feels like artist is often a difficult job to have, right? You need clients, you can rely on clients and all. Where would you recommend to start to create, and how can you find your own art style?
Okay. Well, one, yes, being an artist, I would say, is a difficult job. But everything has positives and negatives, and the rewards of, through history, I think artists have always had difficult jobs, but people do it anyway. So there must be something in it. That's the first thing. You've got to be up for a challenge, though. The second is, if you feel like you have no skills, two things that people always say to me are, one, my handwriting sucks, and two, I can't draw, or I'm not creative. But I don't think it's true. I think it's the same as running or anything, that if you begin, whatever you do is the thing that you do. And I truly believe that anybody can draw and anybody could do calligraphy. Because I didn't get taught calligraphy, I just began and practiced. I think those things can be enhanced if you have a good teacher, positive or feedback, like instant feedback that kind of motivates you on. But you don't necessarily need them. And that it's if you have a practice, even if you do it 5 minutes per day and you see progress over time, that is maybe the most empowering thing that you can do, is to just begin. And not to worry what people think. Like, being a professional artist and having a creative practice are two different things. And I think there's a lot to be gained from just the practice itself.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's also it's kind of so, I don't know, when I was now following in the back, I felt a little bit sad, because I felt like pre-AI, sorry everyone, pre-AI, it felt like, well, yes, there is this really art of calligraphy, and you really appreciate people taking the time and creating it. And now, to some people, and sometimes it's just very difficult to tell apart. Is it now real, or is it AI generated? And so some of the questions that came up, of course, were around AI.
Yeah.
And there were maybe two that are specific on the process, well, not specific on the process, and the other on the copyright. And the first one is, how do you think AI will transform visual art in near future? For example, the work that you've been doing, the collages and all of that. Do you think it will be changing? Do you think you will change the way of how you're working and processing? Has it maybe already changed?
It's definitely already changed. And I think when you said I felt sad, like 5 or 6 years ago, I did this talk in America, and the title of the talk was "The Future of Typography is Human." And it's hilarious to me now because I meant it, but I didn't mean like this. I meant more
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, you know, the alphabet and words were a tool that humans invented to communicate. So in the same way we're using AI now, it's like we are always putting the inputs in and shaping this. But I think it's the speed at which things happen now that made me feel a little bit sad as well. I know that like working by hand is now a luxury. So client jobs, there's a new level of like speed that people expect that mean that you can't necessarily always do things by hand. But that doesn't mean that there's not value in it. Like people still respond if you see a big giant mural that's done in vinyl versus done by hand. People will walk towards something where you can see the brushstrokes. I think there's something in the experience of creating that's valuable, like, and the experience of working, like when I'm working with a team, like there's something about doing things manually that brings people together. There will be value. I mean, we still ride bicycles, we still eat food, like we don't, there's all these like visceral, very human things that I think we're just in a hard time,
Yeah.
but deep down, I don't know.
Yeah, I also feel like when we speak about like all the work that's being produced by AI in the end, there is this incredible value in human curation. Humans really deciding, okay, we're doing this way or that way. We're kind of designing it this way, we're drawing it this way, instead of just relying on AI kind of doing the thing. So I think if anything, the value of kind of human intervention, if you like, or human curation, or whatever you want to call it, is probably going to increase. And also, Jackie is wondering, so with the incredible work that you've been producing and or that you've been putting out in the world for everybody to use, what is then your opinion on many artists having their work used to train AI without their permission?
Look, I think it's extremely complicated because one thing that I noticed when I first started playing around with Midjourney, a couple of years ago, was give you these 4 options. And I was like, this is how I work. Like, I look at other artists, I get inspired, I, take elements, not specifically copying elements,
Sure.
but like I get inspired and then I reform that and take that input and transport and put something else out there. Look, I don't know the answer to this. People have sent me things like, oh, this is a Gemma O'Brien, this is the output that comes out. But I do think there's also this moment of like existential crisis of an artist where I started to think, okay, well, if this can be done, like if I'm not special or if my skills are no longer needed, what does that mean? It's a bit of an identity crisis moment that I think we're all going to encounter. I was at a design conference recently in India and the speaker, we were doing a Q&A like this, and he said on stage, but it's different we're talking about creativity in AI, that's fine if for accounting we want to use AI. I'm like, but wait a minute, what's the difference? Accountants' jobs still, we're all in the same position. I don't know the answer.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Kind of a more, I guess, curious question at this point. How long does it typically take you to create a large mural from start to finish?
If it's black and white, it's about a quarter of the time as if it's color. The Joy mural took 2 weeks from the design, but there was a team of 10 assistants. So it usually depends on the size of the scale of the place. But I would say that the actual painting part can be the same amount of time as it would take to digitize on a computer. Because you're working so large scale, often you can quickly feel it. There are other artists who do a lot of exterior, street art that can do things in 2 days, but I still use brushes. I don't use aerosols, so it can be a bit slower.
Makes sense. And
Yeah.
Jack is wondering, so when you start, do you already have a visual kind of idea of where you want to go with it? Or is it like a lot of experiments first and then say, okay, now I'm going all in? More specifically, is the calligraphy of a word already in your head before you draw it? Or does it come over time?
I would say that up till now, there is a lot of the design and development phase first, especially for large pieces, because you don't want to be iterating large scale just because of the materials and the time it takes. So usually I will do lots of mock-ups. Like sometimes I'll make physical models and like print out and do an almost physical collage or Photoshop into the space. With the calligraphy, it's a little bit more fluid, especially small scale. Like, sometimes I might plan it, but other times, like right now with waffles, that was just something that just was thrown into the mix.
Sure. Maybe just 2 more questions. One from Silke. How do you balance the message that has to come across with the decoration of it?
Oh, very good message. And is that Silke who I met earlier? Yes. Woo! Shout out to all the volunteers, by the way, who I was speaking to earlier. I think that is like the most interesting part of it, because you're choosing a word and you can't avoid meaning. Up until now, obviously, you saw a lot of the words are very short. Like I'm choosing a single word, and it's this sweet spot between how do these letters look? Like an O is a beautiful, symmetrical, it's a circle, So an O in between a J and a Y is perfect for a long wall. So I'm often thinking about the layout of the space, whether it's like, 16:9 or, whatever of the wall, and then narrowing down a number of phrases, and then literally just putting them in to seeing what works. Sometimes it's given to me, so it might be like the "you are here." So then it becomes more of an issue of like, oh, what is the most pleasing selection of typography that fits in this space exactly? So dependent on the number of letters.
Yeah, reverse engineer.
Yeah, this was actually a use I thought of that would be cool for AI, which I haven't done, but I thought about it, was like, okay, I know that I want to use this particular letter style. Maybe a 9-letter word would be good here. And I'd be like, hey, give me 10 9-letter words that,
Right.
Or then translating that into a different language, and all those sorts of little tools that aren't directly creating the artwork, but facilitate the process.
And would it actually make a difference if it was, let's say, in a language that you don't understand? If you had to do it, let's say, in Japanese?
Yeah,
would it be,
definitely.
Would it be, I mean, we're running, again, out of time, but what would it even look like if you had, let's say, to draw in Japanese, and I think the language that you might not understand and know?
I mean, this is something that I'm interested in now because the tools are more available to give a quick translation that I could start to do a design. But then I would always want to, check with someone who was a speaker in that particular language, because I think when you flourish, flourishing could change the form to something really something else. So I did do an art residency recently in Sardinia where I spoke to a woman, and they have like a very unique, like not a dialect, but language. Each region sometimes just towns 5 kilometers apart. And she wrote me these 2 poems, and that's my next project, is to kind of illustrate those into artworks. But that's something, I was using ChatGPT to check this text, and it didn't yet have that, in there. So there's like this potential to keep language alive, and sometimes the best way to do that is to like actually speak to real people and find, something that is unique to that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then maybe final. There is somebody who has put in super important in uppercase.
Yelling.
That's serious here. What is an Australian waffle? I think we have like big fans of waffles here in the house.
Wow. Well, it would probably be with avocado or Vegemite. Probably would be an Australian one. Probably disgusting.
Well, we will maybe find out. I mean, if you want to do some research, and please come to me later, maybe we can reveal that mystery about what an Australian waffle is tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you so much for being with us, Gemma. Fantastic work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.